Some leaders leave footprints, others leave libraries. You're tuning into the Authors on Mission podcast, where industry giants become literacy legends. In every episode, we talk with authors who turn their brilliance into books that transform lives. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authors on Mission. Welcome to your authorship experience. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Authors on Mission podcast. Today, I want to start off with a little bit of an imagery. Picture that you're handed a blank canvas and somebody told you have exactly one lifetime to create a masterpiece. No do-overs, no second chances, just the colors of your choices and the brushstrokes of your decisions. Well, today, we're joined by somebody who spent half a century teaching others not just how to paint that masterpiece, but how to do it with intention and purpose and unshakable faith. Today, I am so pleased to welcome Larry Onan. He's a man who developed two-person startups and turned them into 125-person movements, who's guided countless ministries from confusion to clarity, who just released a book that promises to help stop surviving and start intentionally thriving. This book, Intentional Living and Giving, isn't just another self-help guide. It's really just a way for us to forge the fires of the past 5 decades of real-world leadership, biblical wisdom, and the kind of practical insights that not only come from someone who's built something truly meaningful, but done it from the ground up as well. So without further ado, I would love to introduce our guest, Larry Onan. Welcome to our podcast.
Well, hello, and so good to be with you today. Thank you for the invite.
Of course. We love having people on the show, especially ones who have such a wealth of knowledge from their careers. And, being that your book is all about, spirituality and really making the best of life, I think we're going to have a great discussion about what that means for everybody, and in particular, writers too. So I always like to begin by starting with a little question to get to know you a little bit more. I'm wondering, what point did you decide, after all these years of experience, I have to start down and write a book? Was there a certain inspiration that struck you to sit down and start typing on that keyboard?
Well, there were two inspirations along that line. I never planned on writing a book. That wasn't my goal in life. In fact, if I had my goal probably back in college, it had been either New York or Hollywood. I was really into the theater. I thought that would be the place that I would land. I was really enthralled with the idea of directing and managing, making things happen, and taking something from nothing to something. And so writing books wasn't the thought. Acting was. In college, I started to discover that all my peers in the acting craft were acting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They didn't know how to take off a character. They were hidden behind a character. And I was living that same kind of a life. And so I decided to escape from my passion to get out of theater. And I ended up being an English education speech drama coach and graduating from the University of Colorado. But the question you ask is, how did I get into this? Well, it started by assignment that was given to me, and we can maybe go into that a little bit more. But I did write a book in the 80s around the same themes. And that was helpful at the time, but there was really no guidance and direction of who the audience was and what we were trying to do, but that we were trying to put into written format things that I'd been teaching in seminars and lecturing on for some years. But the actual book of Intentional Living and Giving was birthed in Ireland. I was there about 3 years ago with a group of Europeans. One guy was from Eastern Europe, and he was on by Zoom, and the others were in a conference room. We were in an old pub in Northern Ireland outside of Belfast. And he commented that he said, we can't find any good material on the subject of lifestyle stewardship. It's so difficult to find. I wish somebody would help us just simplify it and make it easy for other people to understand. And I heard it, but I didn't respond to it. But on the way home, flying over from Ireland back to the US, I started saying, okay, maybe you should dust off the writing concepts, get back to the what you did in the 80s and really develop it for a new generation, the Z's, the younger generation of people, because the content that we're talking about here is life transformational in its nature. And so it actually started because somebody commented that they couldn't find the right kind of help to help them. And I was just pressed to say, I've got to go back and do this. So in June of this last year, the book came out, and that's a whole story in itself. But the work was to take concepts that I had been taught, concepts that I actually had a team of people working with me to develop. And we did that for over a decade, and it transformed what we actually did in the business side of my life, because we were helping people raise money, but we changed the whole mindset of how we do that. Now, the book is not about money. The book is about a person living a lifestyle. But one of the things that a person can do is manage the resources that's been entrusted to him. So that usually comes in the form of money. But it started off in, of all places, Northern Ireland. And so I had to come back and get started on it. And I thought, at my age, I just don't really want to write something else. I've written all my life. But this was kind of like, okay, one more time around to help a new generation come to grips with the content that could transform their lives.
That's an amazing way for a book to get started. You find a need that has to be filled, a question that nobody else has yet answered. And by doing so, that's how your book became so successful, because there wasn't that much out there on the topic. So you were able to fill that void.
And Danielle, what's out there is often highly theological. It's more in the realm of Christian apologetics, Christian studies. I wanted something that was very practical for the average person to pick up and read and use as a handbook to start to move out of confusion and distress of life and realize that every day can be a life of purpose and direction and fulfillment. So it's full of stories. And I believe that the way you get people to connect with principles you're trying to teach is by giving them a memorable story that goes along with it. In fact, when I hear people talk about the book, often they'll tell me not what the chapter they're on, but what was the illustration that opened the chapter. I'm reading about your horse. I'm reading about the church bell. I'm reading about the time this happened to you with a garden. And so they really identify with the storytelling before we get into the content of those principles behind the story. And to me, that's a way of doing it. I blog that way. I do other things. It's always tied into a lifestyle story and then the consequences of observing that story or living that story.
You're absolutely right. It's a good thing that there are books out there that are purely theoretical. It's great to, bounce those kinds of ideas off of each other, share them with others. But if you're looking for a book that's going to really resonate with readers and be credible, you do need to have those actionable steps that you've weaved in throughout this process.
There's a place for the academic, but most people do not live in that world. One of my clients right now, and I still have clients even though I'm retired by 10 years, one of my clients is in the Ivy League academic world. He's at one of the Ivy League schools. And his first draft of what I needed from him was so academic that I just could not figure it out. Now, it took us about 5 or 6 months to take that academic truth and boil it down to the business guy that could possibly partner with him and help him accomplish his goals and objectives. So it really is taking concepts and turning it into very understandable little bite-sized pieces. And I think people just learn better that way. I sure learn that way. And I guess probably I write the way I learn. So I'm a very simple guy in that regard, Danielle.
I love that quote, I write the way I learn. And, that's perfect, because by doing so, you're almost walking the reader through the learning process themselves, helping them understand better alongside of you.
Yesterday I was working on a blog that I'm doing to go in a few weeks. And I was telling the story of what I saw about a year ago of a father that took his son to a play yard in a park to play. It was quality time. I sat on another park bench and watched him. And I could see this dad with probably a 7-year-old. And so he let the kid go off and play on the swings and the slides. And he sat down on a table and never watched the child for an hour because he was consumed and distracted by his smartphone. And he was texting, calling, and just flipping through it. The quality time that he was intended for him to be with his son was lost. The little boy played for an hour in a play yard and had nobody to play with. And the dad never spoke to him in an hour. Now, I was there with my dog and I was watching him run around. But as I sat there, I'm just going to wonder, when is he going to go start playing with his son? When is he going to give quality time? Well, that whole illustration of what I watched over a year ago became a blog about what distracts us in life and how do we get out of distraction and get into really connecting with people. That was really what I wanted to talk about. But the illustration, many people can identify that they get caught up in their smartphones and they can be distracted from their best friend across the room because they're curious about the next news feed or whatever it is. And distraction is an issue, but the story helps you remember the illustration.
Understood. And I do really like the illustrations in your text as well. Could you describe a little bit more about that? Were they from, who created these illustrations, by the way?
Well, the illustrations are almost all life illustrations in my case. There's once in a while where I can draw from other people and stories, but most of the time it's experiences I lived through or was definitely involved with to make them happen. And so I can write them honestly from a first person perspective of what I experienced and what I saw, and then bridge that and transition that into here's 5 principles behind this element of success, and I can relate it and bring it back to the illustration at 1 or 2 points in the writing as well. I think people think they got content, but they need to be writing all the time for them to start to see that content come through. People don't become good writers because they decide to sit down and write a book. It's because they're writing and writing and writing. I have a strong philosophy that I've taught for 35 years to people that it's this way here. If it's not in writing, it does not exist. Ideas and concepts float in your brain. And if you can't put it down to where you can let it percolate and talk back to you, it's just an idea that passed through. It's like a dream. But when you put it in writing, you begin to edit it. You begin to refresh it. You begin to get others' input to it. You find out it's a good story or a bad story. And I do have a tendency to collect stories and then say what principle of life comes from what I just saw. But I think if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. So I tell people that are wanting to write, I said, well, then start writing. And it may be a few paragraphs, 200 to 300 words. If you get that down, maybe it's as much of an article for a magazine. You need to be writing in order to know what you're going to be doing with that skill. And you may find out you have no skill in writing. Well, you may just want to just write for your own benefit, and yet I believe that people can work off of what they write, but they need to have something to edit. I was just working today on this. I worked on a funding proposal for a conference that one of the nonprofits organizations that I chair needs to have a teachers conference next in 2026. And so I took about 4 or 5 hours and constructed a project proposal. Now, the requirement there is it can't be more than 2 pages. It's not a lengthy document. You've got to be able to articulate in 2 pages of content, or else it's probably too long. You'll lose somebody if you start to go too long. I've worked with business people all my life, and they do not want long stuff, and they don't like flashy wow stuff. In fact, the wow stuff makes them very nervous. Colors and creative design and stuff like that. They're into looking at business enterprise, and that doesn't come in a lot of colors and wild fonts. So I typically write these as white paper. Now, once they're written in white paper, we can take the white paper and do all kinds of other expressions off of it. But in that particular case, I had to write it myself. And right now it's 2.5 pages. It's for a particular person or two to see. So it's not going to the world per se, but it could make a huge difference on 50 people in another country if a few individuals pick up and sponsor the entire conference a year from now. I had to get that from the purpose all the way down to what the need was and what the benefits were going to be, and it happened to be in 2 pages. Now, I've equipped myself to think in 2 pages for that document, but that's not a chapter of my book. That's purpose driven for another audience and another outcome. And so everything has got to be thinking about who's my audience, what do we want to do with it, what do I want them to consider in the process, and how long is it going to take them to engage with me. And in a book writing environment, you can engage by chapter, but you've also got to structure the book. I've got a 23-year-old grandson, and I've got young adults that are also into publishing, and they're saying the way you wrote books in the 25 years ago was kind of let it flow and just see where it's at. Today, that audience wants to know exactly what you're trying to tell them. So the book, in my case, is in two parts. Here is the content that I want you to learn. And now that you've learned it and you're exposed to it, here's how you apply that content in your life. So the second half of the book is very practical. What do I do next? How do I do this? How do I look out for this? It's full of how-tos and tips on living life after they spent the first 9 chapters getting into the solid content that will benefit them if they apply it right. So even the structure of the book is important. It's not just 18 or 20 chapters. It's got form and substance to even bring about the outcome of what I want to see happen in people's lives. So you've got to write to an audience. I think a lot of times, people try to write it, they don't know who they're writing to. And I think you got to keep in mind, who is this going to help? Who is this going to benefit? Who is going to enjoy this book? And then we write with that audience in mind, because that's who is going to be the greatest benefactor of your writing.
Well, thank you so much for all of those tips. I think, you deserve a pat on the back. Now, that was a huge span of amazing ideas right there. So I think I'm going to hone in on something you said in the very beginning. And mind you, everybody, everything Larry just said is completely true. You should be practicing all of these insights yourself in your own writing. But one of the first things I think is really unique about you and your experiences is, first off, the idea that you write in various mediums. A lot of authors think right off the bat, okay, a book is a book. I'm an author and books are what I write. But you do so much more. You're telling me even before the podcast started, you were working on, I believe it was an academic journal, and then you mentioned doing a blog post. And I think that all just goes to show how the more you do write, the more you do refine your voice. And that's something else you did mention to us. I think that's incredibly important. I'm wondering if you happen to, in your own experiences, notice anything that has improved in your own writing, in particular by being so versatile in the writings types.
Well, I don't think of myself as just an author. I think of myself as a coach and as a mentor, as a consultant. So those different hats, they all use the same dynamics. But when I'm doing those other coaching experiences, I'm looking to one-on-one, trying to help a person go through this process. So all those experiences can be tucked into the way I would even write. And I got to ask myself, okay, is this a written piece? Is this a message that comes because I'm lecturing and teaching? Or is this maybe something that can say in the blog? And is a blog 1,000 words, or is it 200 words? So you start to craft yourself. The book is called Intentional Giving, but I'm talking about intentional writing here. You've got to decide where you're going. I read once in a while, people say, well, how can I start writing a book? Well, they aren't quite ready to start writing a book if they're asking that question, because they need to start collecting the content that makes the book a reality. And the book Intentional Living and Giving came as a result of probably a year or two back in the late 70s of a team of people working with me. Now, in my leadership role, I learned a long time ago that if I don't bring other people in to own a need or a vision or a concept, I'll never get it done, because I don't do it. I get teams of people to do it for me. So people have said, well, Larry, how did you come up with all this content? Well, the content came with a team and they owned it all with me. I just happened to be the one that was tasked with expressing it and making sure that the concepts that we developed were actually implemented. So I attribute everything to the team. If you're ever going to be doing anything in life, You're going to do it because other people help you get there. And I think you've got to be intentional in saying, how do I bring people into this process? And that was probably the greatest secret I learned a long time ago in leadership. And then I tried to do all the way through my life. The document I wrote this morning, I've sent off to another guy and asking him for input and ownership. And he started correcting things that I said wrong. It is better because I ask him to be involved. I don't own the copy. I'm just creating it and allowing you to participate with me in making it better. So, in that whole lifestyle I use all of the strengths I've got. I believe strongly in defining a person's strengths and then living within those strengths. I don't believe in finding your weakness and trying to make them better. For instance, if you ever wanted me to work in the area of finance, you don't want me, because that is not my strength. Now, I got strong things that I can contribute, but if you're asking me to do something that deals with numbers and into the details of accounting or CPA work, I am the worst one when it comes to that. You know what happens when a person works in their weakness? They can do it. But when they work in their weakness, they're going to be exhausted in the process. When you're working in your strengths, you are revitalized and you can just work long hours because your strength gives you energy and your weaknesses create default and disappointments and frustration. So that's kind of how I go about doing it. I want to get teams involved. I want people to own it. And then if I need to figure out what I do, what's my part in expressing it? And yes, I can write, I can do other things, but somebody else may take the same ideas and implement them in a different way.
Wow. So thank you so much for all those tips. I definitely see what you mean by, you need to collect all your ideas and so on and so forth. And of course, be very intentional about what is actually going into the content. I'm sure that has a lot to do with your book as well, and Intentional Living and Giving, which everybody here, if you're looking at the screen right now, the beautiful poster is right on the background behind Larry right now. So when you're looking through those bookstores, you can take a look and try to match that cover when you check it out. But I'd love to take this as an opportunity to segue into talking about your book a little bit. I'm wondering if you would like to give us a little bit of a sneak peek and explain to us a little bit about some of the main ideas here. I was looking through it a bit, and I know that one of the main things you discuss is the intentionality between whether experiences become victories or disappointments. So I'm wondering if you could just give us a little bit of a enlightenment of what that is, and maybe even a quick tip for how we can better live with a positive mindset in that regard.
Well, years ago, when I was working at the University of Pennsylvania, of all places, I was working with students there, and I got a unique assignment to host a music group that was coming into the northeastern United States. And I had 30 days of their time assigned to me to say, put them in as many concerts as you can throughout 5 states. Now, I had no idea what I was doing. That was not the goal of my objective for being at the University of Pennsylvania. So I took a leave of my job at the university and I said, I've got to keep this group busy. Well, I started getting overwhelmed by it, and the leader that was in charge of this whole program said, Larry, whatever you do is okay. You've got the freedom to fail. Now, I had always seen that failure was something you never wanted to get close to. And the mindset changed years ago when I realized that freedom to fail gave me the freedom to try things that I would never try before. I may not hit 100% of the goal, but by having the freedom to fail, I may hit 85 to 90% of the goal. Otherwise, I get stuck and I'm afraid to do anything, and I don't do anything. In that particular experience with that group for touring, and they assumed I would probably book them 3 or 4 times a week in the 5 states. I booked them 30 days straight with no break. I didn't know any better. And the result was they were just pretty much wiped out because we were traveling and they were performing every single night for 30 days. I was getting my money's worth out of them. But because I had the freedom to fail, I also had the freedom to try new things. So that group performed at West Point, at Princeton, they were over at Cornell, they were at University of Pittsburgh, they were all over the place on college campuses throughout that 5-state area. Now, I learned the hard part that I overextended them and they could hardly survive because they needed time for laundry and time for breaks, and traveling is not easy. Well, as a result of that, I learned a lot, but I also learned that I could push the limits and get more out of people and more out of circumstances because I had the freedom to fail. I was assigned one time to, there was a huge conference in Dallas, Texas in the 70s. And my job was to find the music groups to perform at all of these venue conferences around Dallas. Wow. And then the comment was, we need about 50 groups. Do you think you can find and recruit 50 music groups from across the United States to come in for Dallas? And we're not paying anybody anything. It's all free. They've got to come on their own cost. Well, I had 6 months to find 48 groups to show up and perform in Dallas, Texas. Because I had the freedom to fail, I was pressing the limits, and I had the 48 groups. Now, they said they wanted about 50. Did I fail by not having 2 more groups? No. But if I had not been stretched, I probably would have told them the most I could get is 5 or 10 groups. So I think the freedom to fail is always stretching ourselves and saying, I can make this happen. I've got projects that, even at my age, I think this is not done yet. I've still got to work on it because I haven't accomplished the objective I want to. But having the freedom to fail made a huge difference, along with the idea of building teams to believe in what we're doing so we do it together. So, but that would, an illustration was, yes, I could have failed way back in the dark ages. I could have failed for the Dallas. I could have failed a year ago on some things that I was working on, but I always have in my mind, I've always got that freedom to fail. The content of the book ended up being an assignment to me originally on an argument that was going on with leaders. And they said, well, maybe Larry can investigate this subject and report on us how we would do X. I realized later that was a ploy to get off subject, and they assigned it to me with no expectations that I would do anything. But I've also got, in my strengths, I've got a high degree of responsibility. So about 3 weeks later, when nobody called me about how I was coming on the assignment, I got my leadership team together and I said, let's investigate this subject called stewardship. Now, I'm a preacher's kid by way back in the dark ages. And in a culture of the church, stewardship meant raise money for the church and try to get people to 10%. It's an old historic thing, came out of the New Testament. Man, I discovered in that study that I did that money has really nothing to do with lifestyle stewardship. And when I started to put together the principles behind that with this team working with me, it radically changed how we did things for the rest of our lives together. And we started raising more funding, we started growing, we started expanding. And one of the simple things would be, you've heard it in fundraising, well, we've got to get donors. Well, donors are people that get a needle stuck in the arm and you get a sugar cube at the end of giving a pint of blood. You go through pain and you get a sugar cube. Fundraising is always related to an exchange. You do this for me, I'll do this for you. You send me money, I'll send you a blanket. You send me money, I'll send you a t-shirt. You run in my race and give me money and I give you an award that you put around your neck. Everything is on an exchange. There's nothing wrong with exchanges, but it's a very slow way to raise significant funding. And when I realized that fund development was energizing partners to believe in the cause just like I believed in the cause, and I treated them as equal partners. So in this particular case, what the mission was critical that they be involved. They were equally involved in the mission as much as everybody that was hired to make the mission happen. And it was a total game changer in how we saw people, how we followed them up, how we related to them, because they were the ones that made it really possible. We were simply facilitating something for them. So I got into lifestyle stewardship. The book, Intentional Living and Giving, outlines the 5 key principles of that stewardship concept and then how you live that, because every one of us, there's nothing, I don't own a thing. Now, the state of California thinks I own a house, they think I own a car, they even tax me for it. But when I realize I don't own those, I'm only entrusted to use it, that it belongs to somebody else. Even the clothes I wear are not my clothes. So my mindset is I'm entrusted to use the money I get, the clothes I got, the car I drive, everything in life has been given to me for a day, and it's my job to use it wisely to influence the lives of others. And that is where purpose and direction come from. In the book, people will be introduced to what's called an authorized wealth distributor. And it's not wealth of money, it's about everything that you've got to give. And it could be spending 15 times with a neighbor or a friend and just listening, not talking. It could be a lot of different expressions. There's over 100 things that people can give and never have to give a dime financially. Now, I believe in giving money too, but the point of it is life is full of giving ourselves away, and we need to learn how to do that. So that's the concept behind the book. And in like I mentioned, the latter half of the book, once we get the concept down, it's a spiritual journey. Without apology, it's a faith-based oriented book, but it's a book that says, I'm here for a purpose. I can learn my purpose. Here's how I tap into my purpose. And then here's how I express that purpose for the rest of my life. So right now, when I get up in the mornings, the first thing I do, other than stretching a little bit before I step out of bed, as I said, I'm here for a purpose today. How do I influence the lives of other people? That's just my beginning on life today. And then I'm saying, okay, there's a podcast, or there's this writing assignment, or I've got to go shopping at a Costco store. Anything I do is around meeting my purpose. That's what gives me and will give anybody tremendous satisfaction and the sense of thriving in life, rather than the sense of desperately wondering why things are not working out right in the first place. It's probably because they're in the process of learning a lesson, and they need to stop and listen about what they need to be learning. So that's a little bit of what the book is, and that's how I came. And then the book is structured around how I take people through that process. So anybody can get the book. It's at Barnes and Noble. It's at Amazon. Intentional Living and Giving. If you want an autographed copy, you got to go to larryonan.com and get it the old-fashioned way, and then I'll send it by snail mail out to you with my signature. But most people just want the book. In fact, if you go on my website, you'll probably, I think it's still there, where you can download it to your choice of electronic down file and read it that way. Many people just like to read it in their Kindle or whatever the tool is that they use.
Understood. Well, I really do appreciate this really nice detailed explanation of what the book is, because it allows our listeners today to know exactly what they can expect from the book and makes them hungry for a little bit more. I think right now, to me, the thing that resonates most to me is the idea about the freedom to fail. I think that's something a lot of people do struggle with. We're afraid to let ourselves go or to experiment with mistakes, but your book does guide us through that. And another thing I think that's been a metaphor throughout this entire podcast is the importance of teams and other people in your philosophies and your books, right? The idea that they do hold you accountable and they help you open doors, which is what you mentioned before. That being said, having people by your side and having a team of people is so important. So how can people kind of join your team? How can they get connected with you and learn more and get access to your resources? What are the best links they can find you at?
Well, probably the best way for people to connect with me personally, if that's what they're wanting to do, is go to larryonan.com. Leave a note there. I watch that. There's also a Facebook for Intentional Living and Giving. You can comment there. I do blogs about once a week. I'm not a 3-time-a-week blogger. Some people kind of think that's the end, the cat's meow. To me, that's one more way of expressing. You'll get more of my insights on life and reflections on life on just the blogs that you are free to read anytime. On the website, you get into other podcasts that I've been on and things of that nature. And if they're really wanting questions, just ask them on Facebook or ask them at my website. I enjoy helping people get out of the chaos that their lives are often in. And I enjoy helping point them in a direction that will help solve some of the issues that they have. Life is complicated. There's no face about it. And in this day and age, it seems like it's moving so fast we can hardly breathe. But we can stop and pause and take a breath and find that we were really designed with purpose, and that purpose is available to anybody. yes, there are some principles in how you get there. So you don't, and I believe if you don't kind of follow the principles, you're not probably going to get to where you want to be. So I'm a big one for say, just follow the steps, so to speak. Follow these understandings, and you're going to start seeing life transformed around you. And that's what I'm hoping people to do. So I'm more than available to interact if that's what a person wants. Get the book if they want to see my style, because that's going to help you know how I use those stories and how I weave a story of a situation into a life experience. And that technique is easy to do because every one of us is full of life experiences. And we may not think that they're very big. I wasn't going to the park the other day with my dog to find a father teaching me about distraction. But because I had writer's eyes and development eyes, I saw him sitting over there and realized he was teaching me something that was probably not what he was really wanting to teach me. But he can help others because of what I learned by watching him.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all that information. To everybody, if you'd like to get connected, stay up to date, and also to check out more information about the book, I'm going to put those links that he just mentioned into the description box of this podcast today, so you can go ahead and click on over. Now, Larry, as we wrap up today's discussion, I think it's amazing, all this tips that you've given us. It's really clear that you're helping people develop their character, learning that the outcomes do depend on your intentionality, and there's just so many more tips as well that we can learn from you. So it's been great. If you're a listener today, and whether you're sitting at your car or at your desk or wherever you're hearing this, if you're also kind of feeling stuck or uncertain about your next steps, then think about what Larry said. And when this is done, click on over to those links and get involved. Larry, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. It's been a true pleasure.
Thank you very much. It's been great to join you today. Hope the people that are listening and thinking, just start writing. Get on that computer, spend 5 minutes, see what a paragraph does. One paragraph leads to a page, and a page soon leads to a chapter, and a chapter ends up finishing a book. So you got to start someplace. Do it.
You do have to start someplace. If you want to write a book, just start writing. One of the most basic but important steps that you can possibly take.
Right.
So I really do appreciate all of that. Well, everybody, that brings us to the end of today's episode. We've learned today that building success or writing books is not the bare minimum you could do. It's about understanding that your life right now, with all its victories and disappointments, is the raw material for something extraordinary. So in Intentional Living and Giving, this book is available wherever it's sold. You can find more information there. And until next time, remember, you're not just living your life, you're authoring a legacy. So make it intentional. We'll see you next time on the Authors on Mission podcast.
This is Danielle Hutchinson reminding you that somewhere, someone needs the book that only you can write. Visit authorsonmission.com to start your legacy. Until next time, keep leading, keep inspiring, and keep thinking in chapters. Have a great day.